By the time the whole office heard the heartbeat, Ethan Whitmore had already destroyed the only two people who had never betrayed him. The glass conference room on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Biotech looked more like a courtroom than a place where people discussed quarterly numbers. Noah Bennett stood at the far end of the long table with a cardboard box pressed against his ribs, his employee badge, a framed photo of his little sister, and 3 years of loyal work reduced to objects that rattled softly whenever his hands shook. He kept his left palm low against his stomach, not enough for anyone to notice, just enough to remind himself to breathe. 12 weeks, he thought, stay calm for 12 weeks. At the head of the table sat Ethan Whitmore, Alpha CEO, billionaire founder, and the man who had once whispered Noah's name like it was the only honest thing left in the world. This morning, he did not say Noah. He looked down at the file in front of him and said, "Mr. Bennett." The formality cut deeper than shouting ever could. Around them, the board members watched in polished silence. Beyond the glass walls, employees had begun to gather, pretending to check printers, refill coffee, or carry folders they had no reason to hold. Everyone knew something was happening. Everyone wanted to see the Omega assistant who had been called upstairs under security escort. Ethan opened the folder and slid several pages across the table. Unauthorized access, confidential research copied from a restricted server, a transfer attempt traced to your login at 11:42 p.m. last night. Noah stared at the documents, his pulse thudding in his ears. That's not possible. I wasn't here last night. Ethan's expression did not change. His dark suit was perfect, his black hair neatly combed back, his gray-blue eyes colder than the rain behind him. His scent, usually cedarwood and frost, filled the room with something sharper, something controlled and unforgiving. Your badge entered the building. Your password opened the file. Your workstation initiated the transfer. Then someone used my badge, Noah said, trying to keep his voice steady, or my computer. Ethan, please, you know I would never. You will address me as Mr. Whitmore in this room. The words landed cleanly, publicly, and the people outside the glass went still. Noah felt heat rise behind his eyes, but he refused to let the tears fall. Not here, not with everyone watching, not while the tiny life under his hand depended on him staying upright. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket with the calm precision of a man signing a sentence. Effective immediately, your employment at Whitmore Biotech is terminated. Security will escort you out after you return all company property. Noah's fingers tightened around the box. You're firing me without even asking why someone would frame me. Ethan's jaw flexed once. I should have known better than to trust an Omega who needed money that badly. A sound moved through the office beyond the glass, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper, but close enough to shame. Noah looked at him then, really looked at him. Searching for any trace of the Alpha who had once held his trembling hand through a long, dangerous night and begged him not to leave. There was nothing, only the CEO, only the judge, only the man who had given him money the morning after in mistaken silence for closure. Noah set the box on the table because his arms had begun to ache. His stomach tightened, a small warning pain that made the room tilt for half a second. He swallowed hard and forced himself to stand straight. I didn't steal from you, he said softly, and I didn't stay because I wanted your money. Ethan's eyes flickered, but only for a moment. Badge, laptop, office key, one by one Noah placed them on the table. The badge slipped from his fingers and skidded across the polished surface before falling to the carpet near Ethan's chair. No one moved to help him. Noah bent to pick it up, and a sharper pain pulled low through his body, sudden enough to steal his breath. His hand flew to his stomach. A thin wave of scent escaped him before he could stop it, soft honey, cold rain, and something new, something fragile and warm beneath the fear. Every Alpha in the room lifted their head. Ethan went completely still. The change in the room was so immediate that Noah felt it before he understood it. Chairs stopped creaking, pens stopped tapping. Someone beyond the glass whispered his name, and then even that disappeared into a silence so tight it seemed to press against the windows. Noah remained half-bent, one hand braced against the edge of the conference table, the other curved over his stomach as if his palm alone could shield the tiny life inside him. The pain was not strong, not yet, but it was sharp enough to frighten him. He drew in a careful breath through his nose and tasted the sterile chill of the office air. The bitter coffee on the table, the expensive cologne of board members, and underneath it all, Ethan's scent, turning darker, colder, more alert. Ethan had noticed. Of course he had noticed. Every alpha in the room had. Noah forced himself upright before anyone could call him weak. "I am fine," he said, though his voice had gone thin. Rachel Monroe, the human resources director, pushed back her chair. She was a beta in her early 40s, composed and practical, the only person in the room whose eyes held concern instead of suspicion. "Noah, you are not fine. Sit down." "I said I am fine." He reached for the badge on the carpet, but Rachel stepped around the table and picked it up first. She did not hand it to Ethan. She held it against her chest like evidence that Noah had once belonged here. Ethan's gaze moved from Rachel to Noah's stomach, then back to Noah's face. For one dangerous second, something almost human broke through his expression. Noah saw the question forming there, the instinctive pull of an alpha recognizing distress in an omega he had once been close enough to know by breath alone. Then Ethan's mouth tightened. The CEO returned. "This meeting is over," he said. "Security can handle the rest." The words stirred the people outside the glass. 2 security officers appeared near the hallway, uncertain and uncomfortable, both looking as if they would rather be anywhere else. Noah straightened his shoulders. He would walk out on his own. He would not be dragged through the lobby. He would not give the rumor mill that final picture. Rachel lowered her voice. "Noah, at least let medical check you before you leave." "No," he said quickly, too quickly. Ethan heard it. His eyes sharpened. "Why not?" Noah looked at him, and a cold ache opened beneath his ribs. After everything, after the accusation, after the humiliation, that was the first question he chose to ask. Not whether Noah had eaten, not whether the pain was serious, not whether he had been framed. Why not? As if every hidden part of Noah's life was still something Ethan had the right to inspect. "Because I do not want to be touched in a conference room full of people who already decided I am guilty," Noah said. Rachel's face softened. One of the board members looked down at the table. Outside the glass, a young receptionist covered her mouth, suddenly ashamed of watching. Ethan came around the head of the table slowly. He was 6 feet 2 inches of controlled authority, his polished shoes quiet against the carpet, his presence pushing the air ahead of him. Noah hated that his body still recognized him, hated that some frightened, ancient part of him wanted to step closer to the strongest alpha in the room, even when that alpha was the reason he was shaking. Ethan stopped several feet away. "If you are attempting to delay the consequences of your actions, it will not work." The sentence was calm, but it made Rachel turn on him. "Mr. Whitmore," he almost collapsed. "And last night, someone used his credentials to compromise a $200 million research program." Noah laughed once, very softly, because the alternative was crying. "You think I would risk my entire life for a file I helped organize for you?" Ethan's expression flickered again. Noah pressed on, his voice low but clear. "I worked late every night because you asked me to. I skipped meals because your calendar changed every 10 minutes. I remembered your medication schedule, your investor calls, the names of board members' children, the exact temperature you wanted this room before every meeting. I gave this company 3 years of my life, and you believed a timestamp before you believed me." No one moved. The rain tapped harder against the glass, filling the spaces between Noah's words. Ethan's throat shifted, but he did not answer. Noah reached for his box again. This time, his fingers closed around the framed photo of his little sister, and the room tilted more violently. A small, frightened sound escaped him before he could swallow it. The scent broke again, warmer this time, threaded with panic and something unmistakably delicate. Rachel's hand flew to her phone. "I am calling medical now." "Rachel, do not," Noah whispered. Ethan's eyes dropped to Noah's stomach. His face went pale in a way Noah had never seen before, not with fear, not yet, with recognition that had not found its name. "Noah," he said, and for the first time all morning, he forgot to call him Mr. Bennett. The sound of his name and Ethan's voice nearly broke the careful wall Noah had built around himself. For one brief second, the conference room vanished, and he was back in Ethan's private office 12 weeks earlier, when the city had been drowning in the same kind of rain. And every light in the Whitmore Tower had gone dim, except the one behind Ethan's door. Noah had been working late because Ethan had asked him to reorganize 3 investor briefings before morning. He remembered the smell of black coffee gone cold on the desk, the low hum of the air conditioner, the storm pressing against the windows like a living thing. Then he remembered Ethan on the other side of the room, no longer untouchable, no longer perfect, one hand gripping the back of a chair as he fought to stay standing. Someone had switched his suppressant medication. Later, that fact would be buried under company silence and private shame. But Noah had known something was wrong the moment he heard Ethan say his name, not with command, with fear. "Stay," Ethan had whispered that night, his voice rough with exhaustion and restraint. "You are the only one who does not make me feel like a monster." Noah had stayed. He had stayed because Ethan was suffering, because every instinct in him refused to abandon a person in distress. And because beneath the power, the money, the glass walls, and the terrifying reputation, Ethan Whitmore had looked at him like Noah was not invisible. The memory came back in fragments, none of them shameful, all of them tender and heartbreaking. Ethan's coat falling across the couch, Noah's hand wrapped around his, the way Ethan had pressed his forehead to Noah's shoulder and breathed like a man finding shelter after years in a storm. There had been no cruelty in him then, no cold judgment, no Mr. Bennett, only Ethan, shaking with the effort to remain gentle, repeating, "You can leave. You can leave any time." But Noah had not left. By sunrise, the crisis had passed, and Ethan had fallen asleep on the office sofa with Noah's name still soft on his lips. For one foolish hour, Noah had believed something real had happened between them, not something perfect, not something simple, but something human. Then morning came. Ethan woke before him, already dressed, already distant, already ashamed of needing anyone. On the desk was a sealed envelope. Inside was a check large enough to pay Noah's rent for 2 years and a short non-disclosure agreement written in the company's legal language. No note, no apology, no question asking whether Noah was all right. Noah had stood in that silent office with the paper trembling in his hands, understanding with terrible clarity that Ethan had turned the most vulnerable night of both their lives into a transaction. He tore the check into 4 pieces before leaving. He kept his job because he needed health insurance, because his little sister still depended on him, and because running away felt too much like admitting Ethan had been right to reduce him to a mistake. 8 weeks later, in a small clinic 3 subway stops from his apartment in Queens, a tired nurse turned a screen toward him and said, "There is the heartbeat." Noah had cried then, silently, with one hand over his mouth and the other over his stomach, not because he was afraid of the baby, but because he had never loved anything so quickly or so completely. Since that day, he had built his whole life around keeping the child safe. He stopped drinking coffee. He took vitamins at the same time every morning. He avoided crowded alpha elevators and pretended the nausea was from bad deli sandwiches. He wore loose shirts and kept a sweater at his desk. He rehearsed telling Ethan 100 times, and every version ended with the memory of that check. Now, in the glass conference room, Ethan was staring at him as if the past had finally begun to crawl out from under the locked door where he had buried it. Rachel's voice cut through the silence, firm and urgent. "Medical is on the way." Noah shook his head, panic rising. "Please, Rachel, not here." Ethan took one step closer. "What are you hiding?" The question was quiet, but it filled the room. Noah looked at the man who had held him like a prayer and dismissed him like a problem, and for the first time, he felt something colder than heartbreak. He felt protective, something you lost the right to ask about, Noah said. Noah's words did not echo, but they changed the temperature of the room. As surely as if someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. Ethan stopped moving for the first time since the meeting began. He looked less like the man who owned the tower and more like someone standing at the edge of a truth he was not ready to see. Noah could feel every eye on him through the glass walls. The office outside had fully stopped pretending to work. Assistants stood frozen with folders in their arms. Analysts stared from behind monitors. Someone near the reception desk had lowered a coffee cup without drinking from it. The whole floor had become a court of wolves, and Noah was the wounded thing they had all decided was safe to watch. He hated that most of them knew pieces of his life, but not the whole of it. They knew he arrived before sunrise. That he stayed long after the cleaning crew came through, that he sent money home every month to help his younger sister finish nursing school in Ohio. They knew he wore the same brown coat for 3 winters and packed leftovers in plastic containers instead of buying lunch downstairs. They knew just enough to believe Ethan when he said no one needed money badly enough to betray him. A murmur rose outside the glass, low and poisonous. Noah caught only fragments. He slept his way up. I heard there was a pregnancy rumor. Omegas always make things complicated. Rachel's face hardened. She turned toward the glass and pulled the privacy shade switch, but Ethan lifted one hand. Leave it. Noah looked at him sharply. You want them to watch? Ethan's eyes stayed on Noah's face, but his voice belonged to the CEO again. Transparency matters when company trust has been compromised. A board member cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable, but no one challenged him. Noah almost smiled. Transparency, that was what Ethan called it. Not humiliation, not punishment, not the public stripping away of a person's dignity.